I love Star Trek, and I have done since Star Trek Next Generation. Now, admittedly, I fell in love with it because one of the first characters I saw was Worf, and I thought he looked like my dad. I mean, just have a look at it. I think you can see the similarities, especially in the forehead region. Now, growing up in the 90s was a great time to be a Star Trek fan. We followed Picard and we had the crew of the Enterprise Ds, and we followed them boldly going where no one has gone before. We had Sisko on Deep Space Nine boldly going absolutely nowhere at all, and we had Voyager and Janeway going and doing some horrific things.
I think we all should hear what you have to say.
Please come with me, Mr. Truex.
And it all came crashing down with Enterprise and Nemesis. For all intents and purpose, 2005 was the death of Star Trek and the end of that golden age. It just abruptly came to an end. In 2009, like Spock before it, Trek rose from the dead and it was back. The team of J.J. Abrams, Robert Orci and Alex Kurtzman brought to us Star Trek, a movie that served as a sort of a reboot of Star Trek. It had younger actors cast in the roles of the original series crew. It was even based in a different timeline called, by fans, the Kelvin timeline. Two more movies followed, Into Darkness, which was very ill received, and the mostly forgotten, but the one that I think is actually the best in that trilogy, Beyond. Now, all of this led to talk of reviving Star Trek on its spiritual home, television. And Alex Kurtzman was given the reins, kicking things off with Star Trek Discovery, the first Star Trek series in 12 years. Now, naturally, of course, being the first Star Trek series in 12 years, it was well received and loved by all. Well, not exactly. Whilst Discovery does have its fans, and look, hands up, I'm one of them. I enjoyed most of Star Trek Discovery. So, it does receive a lot of hate, and listen, some of it is justified. I get it. There's too much focus on Burnham as a main character without knowing what's going on with the rest of the bridge crew, and if we do get some development of them, it's one episode and they're done. There are issues with the writing and pacing at times as well, and these are fully justified reasons to hate on Discovery. However, there's something else that's brought up that always baffles me. And even some of the more well-received new Trek, such as Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks Prodigy, occasionally you see people pop up with the hate there as well. Something I completely don't understand. And what that is? People saying Star Trek has gone woke. Honestly, this is a wild take for me, because this makes me question whether or not this person's actually seen Star Trek. Star Trek is the franchise where we've seen the first scripted interracial kiss on television between Kirk and Uhura. We saw Riker, who is the manliest of men, fall in love with someone who is non-binary. And as someone who is Asian, I saw an Asian man be allowed to drive the Enterprise. Honestly, massive deal for us. I've been thinking long and hard about how someone can criticize Star Trek for going woke, and I think I've come up with the answer, and that's what we're going to discuss in the rest of this video. So if you agree with me or you have any other thoughts on it, please feel free to comment below. Give the video a like if you do agree with me. If you don't agree with me, you know, just move on. Just move on with your life. That's okay as well. And I'm trying to work towards 500 subscribers on this channel, so if you do enjoy this content and you want to see more, please hit the subscribe button. The problem? Nicholas Meyer. Now, before you start jumping on the comments and flaming me, I don't hate Nicholas Meyer. His two movies, The Wrath of Khan and Undiscovered Country, are two of my three favorite Star Trek films. But he did something to Star Trek that changed it forever. After the problems with Star Trek the Motion Picture, Paramount Pictures brought in Harve Bennett and Nicholas Meyer to write and direct Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan. Paramount had been unhappy with the creative direction, the costs and the production of the motion picture, and they were actually ready to axe Star Trek altogether, but the financial success of the motion picture saw them greenlight a sequel. The Wrath of Khan went on to become a financial success, and it's considered to be the best Star Trek film of all time. However, it wasn't loved by one person in particular, Gene Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, hated the script to Wrath of Khan, and he actually did everything he could to torpedo that movie. He leaked that the death of Spock was coming, and then he actually leaked the entire script before its release. He had correspondence with Nicholas Meyer, which Meyer later on would describe as very toxic, and something that he actually actively blocked from his memory. So why did Roddenberry hate Wrath of Khan? He hated that Starfleet was written in a much more militaristic fashion than he had originally envisioned in the original series. Roddenberry had written Star Trek with an idealistic take on where humanity could end up if we set aside our differences and use reason, diplomacy, and intellect to solve our problems. Starfleet, they were explorers, not military officers. And this idealism is all the way through the original series and the early seasons of The Next Generation. And even Captain Picard himself was a skilled diplomat, not a skilled tactician, as did have the Picard maneuver, which wasn't just him tugging down on his shirt. Now, whether or not one interpretation of Star Trek is better than the other is a moot point. What I want to discuss is the effect that Nicholas Meyer had on Star Trek and its fans. By making Star Trek focus more on the military aspects of the series, the ranks, the space battles, and less on the cerebral aspects of the franchise, it attracted fans who were more keen on that military aspect as opposed to the social commentary that the TV show had had in its past and its present. This was later reinforced after the death of Roddenberry and the series Deep Space Nine, in which later seasons were focused on war and its effects on Starfleet and the Federation. As a result, there are a lot of Star Trek fans out there that see Starfleet as a military organization as opposed to a group of explorers with peacekeeping obligations. And these fans tend to have an adverse reaction to anything that doesn't feed into the idea of Starfleet being a military and labeling anything they don't like as woke, despite the fact that every series of Star Trek in the past has dealt with social issues. Even Deep Space Nine, which is the most militaristic of the Star Trek series, has the exceptional two-parter episode Past Tense, where they discuss what happens in America when the poor, the disabled, and immigrants are demonized by the public and media, taken away from society and hidden in sanctuary districts, and what the consequences of those actions are. Does that sound familiar? That episode came out in 1995. The events of that episode happened in 2024. Nicholas Meyer directed two of the greatest Star Trek movies. He did exactly what he needed to make Star Trek work on the big screen, because when you try to be too cerebral, you end up with the motion picture which almost killed Star Trek. However, when someone says Star Trek has gone woke, I really don't understand what they're trying to say, because Star Trek has always been shining a light on social and political issues throughout its history. We've had female captains, black captains, storylines that have supported the LGBT community. Look, I'm not saying that Star Trek is without its criticism, because frankly it isn't. There are obvious issues with the writing, and this is no different to the early criticisms of The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, or Enterprise had. They have all had issues with their writing or missing the mark, but every single one of these series, everything that is in Star Trek, has always and will always be unashamedly woke. So when someone says to me that Star Trek is terrible now because it's gone woke, I don't think they've watched Star Trek at all.